Ну, где тогда? Давай, может быть, подключим твой компьютер все-таки. Или нет?
Under Secretary General Hochschild, can you just switch on your camera and your microphone just to have a mic test? If you can hear me. And also Valerie, welcome.
Thank you so much. I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear and see you. Great, thank you. We're still missing a few. So the projected start time is 20 past. So yeah. Good morning, Vint. Can you hear us? If we can do a quick camera and microphone test, that'd be great. Oh, great. Yes.
Sorry to be a bit late. I should have joined a while ago. And my email got away with me. I apologize for that.
That's no problem. Thank you.
Changatai, I believe we need to start in a couple of minutes time. And as we mentioned, Louis will play the video. Then Jonathan will start the session right away at 12:20.
Yes. Just if Under Secretary General Hochschild, if you want to test your video.
The test was done earlier in the...
Oh, it was done. Oh, it works.
Yeah, it was
okay.
done. Yeah, so that's
right,
okay.
then.
I think, yeah.
I'll hand it over to Jonathan then.
Louis to play the video when Louis is ready. Once that Jonathan is a 2-minute video, and you can come right in after the video.
Of course, yeah. Thank you.
little can have more relevance to our lives and futures than the responsible and effective governance of the Internet and digital technology.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Charles. I'm the Managing Director of Communications of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And for many years, I was a BBC foreign correspondent and very lucky to have attended several physical meetings of the IGF. Here we are, it's come around very quickly, the closing high-level session of the 15th Annual Internet Governance Forum. After several days of really fascinating discussions, I've been lucky enough to see some of them myself, and I hope you've caught some of them as well. And of course, as we've just seen in that video, the internet has never been more important in the world in which we're currently living. Over the next hour or two, we will be examining just what the future holds for the internet. What does that mean for governance? We have two really impressive high-level panels for you. But first of all, we're going to start with some remarks at this closing session by the United Nations Secretary General. We're very happy to welcome Antonio Guterres.
It is a pleasure to address this closing session of the 15th Annual Internet Governance Forum. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown a spotlight on the importance of digital technologies and transformation, and on the urgent need to enhance the role of the IGF as a platform for dialogue on proposed solutions. This year has brought new evidence of the benefits of connectivity. Internet access is protecting healthcare, jobs and lives. But the pandemic is exacerbating inequalities of all kinds, including the digital divide. Those without access to digital technology, almost half the world, are denied opportunities to study, communicate, trade, shop, work, and participate in much of modern life. Close to 500 million students are affected by school closures, and the most marginalized, including at least 11 million girls, are at high risk of never returning to school. And for those online, connectivity has increased vulnerability to harms and abuses of many kinds. The shadow pandemic of disinformation about COVID-19 has put health and lives at risk and threatens to reduce the uptake and effectiveness of any vaccines that become available. Meanwhile, hate speech and discrimination are running riot in digital spaces, and the risk of fragmented internet is greater than ever. These are critical areas where my roadmap for digital cooperation sets a way forward through its vision to connect, respect and protect all people online. I welcome this forum's focus on digital inclusion, which is essential to building a strong recovery. We urgently need to address the growing digital gender gap and put digital technology to work for those who need it most: the vulnerable, the marginalized, those living in poverty, and people suffering from discrimination of all kinds. The pursuit of inclusion must determine not just our approach to expanding connectivity, but also how we manage data. We need to look at how we can make the best use of digital data for the public good and develop data governance frameworks that recognize diversity, empower businesses and communities, and advance the Sustainable Development Goals. Many of you, representing different communities from governments, the private sector, civil society, the technical and academic communities, are working closely with the United Nations to further the aims of the roadmap. These include narrowing digital divides, promoting digital inclusion, achieving universal connectivity, and protecting human rights online. Together, as we seek to build a strong recovery from the pandemic, we can reduce the harmful aspects of digital technology and unleash its power as a true equalizer and enabler. I urge all governments to make sure that your response and recovery plans include increasing digital connectivity in a way that is affordable, safe, and inclusive. The forum's broad-ranging discussions over the last week have been important and meaningful. The IGF has a vital role in connecting the dots on the global digital map, but it cannot fulfill this role unless it reaches decision makers. We must now act decisively and urgently to strengthen the IGF, so that it can enhance its unique role in the digital cooperation architecture. After more than a decade of consultations, we have identified several areas of improvement. These range from increasing the forum's visibility and funding sustainability to a proposed multi-stakeholder high-level body within the IGF that can translate its important discussions into concrete impact. My roadmap sets out a series of actions to this end, and I intend to move quickly on those that fall under my responsibility. We need an Internet governance forum that is responsive, relevant, and impactful. We need it to be a place where governments, companies, technical experts, and civil society from all parts of the world come together, share ideas, debate solutions, and agree on common standards and principles. I congratulate you again on your discussions this week, and I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. A big thank you from us to the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, for delivering those closing remarks. As I say, we have some fascinating debate coming up. First of all, though, we're going to watch a video, IGF 2020, thematic key messages. Let's see some of the key messages from the events of the past few days.
In the least developed countries, only 19% individuals were online in 20. We are leaving a large majority behind. We need solutions that help bridge the digital divide so that the benefits of the digital technologies can reach those being left behind unconnected.
The SDG target of achieving universal connectivity by 2020 has not been met. In fact, 3.6 billion people continue to lack access to the internet.
Hello, and apologies for those of you who had trouble hearing part of that video. It is available online, by the way. You will be able to see it anytime you like. Go and take a look. And here we are at the first of our panels now. We are going to be looking in the next few minutes at what's happening with the internet now, what's next, and is the internet ready for COVID-19 recovery? Let me introduce the panel, if I could ask them to make sure their cameras are switched on and their sound is switched on panel one. First of all, let me introduce Vice Minister of National Planning and Economic Policy from Costa Rica, that's Carlos Molina. Dr. Ahmadin Ahmed, the State Minister of Innovation and Technology of Ethiopia. Maxim Pashin, the Deputy Minister of Digital Development, Communications and Mass Media from the Russian Federation. Krzysztof Schubert, Republic of Poland Plenipotentiary for the UN IGF 2021. Vera Songwe, the United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary for the UN Economic Commission, for Africa. And finally, Henrietta Esterhuizen, the IGF Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group Chair, the MAG Chair, very important, of course, in this event. Let me start, I think, by looking at the future host countries. We've got Poland hosting the IGF in 2021, Ethiopia in 2022, Russia in 2025. And I'd like to start with those ministers, perhaps the Polish minister first, the Republic of Poland Plenipotentiary, Krzysztof Schubert. And I wonder, everything we've heard this year, knowing about this trends and development, in what areas do you think the IGF should focus in the future in terms of internet governance? I could ask you first, Krzysztof Schubert.
Oh, hello. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So for me as a former MAC member, it gives me a great pleasure to be here with you today online. And I will start with a couple of comments on the question posed. So in my opinion, COVID-19 has demonstrated the importance of digital technologies, which allows business, government, and people's life to continue as usual. And it is clear as well that we can use innovative digital technologies in pandemic response. And actually COVID-19 pandemic accelerated many projects that had been long overdue. So it is actually quite our experience from last weeks or months. It worked out to the effect that priorities were changed in order to favor digital policies and digital-based approach in general. And it has been our experience in Poland. Back to your question, is the internet ready for COVID-19 recovery? I would say that yes. In fact, this is the best recovery plan we can have. So digital solutions based on internet actually have allowed millions to continue work in lockdown. So the strategic importance of the internet has been confirmed. If there is one thing remote education has certainly taught us, it is that modern digital infrastructure is extremely important, actually strategic those days. In addition, we must ensure cybersecurity, guarantee trusted and secure data processing, and reinforce our efforts toward digital and cyber education. In this context, in the era of shaping a new digital cyber society, the process of building an open, safe, ethical, and transparent global internet becomes particularly important. In broad perspective, I would also add that we need more international cooperation on big projects, especially like in our case in Central Eastern Europe, across political formats we have in place, such as 3Cs or V4 formats, and put, in my opinion, much bigger focus on coordinated investment and funds, such the lack of investment capital may soon become a major issue for SMEs worldwide, having in mind at the same time that 60% plus of innovation is within digital segment. So there is still a lot of work to be done in this area, and there are still many questions that we will seek answers to during the next editions of IGF in Poland in the upcoming year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to come back at you with one question, I mean, you talked about the growing, how we've seen the growing importance of the internet in recent months. And it will be very important in the recovery. What does that mean, do you think, for the growing need for some form of internet governance?
Yeah, I think what I see from at least our experience or across Europe, that many governments realize the importance of digital technologies. So they are really up to date. And I think that digital as a strategy or digital transformation, it's much higher right now on their agenda, which is good, having in mind the bad situation we have with the pandemic. So I would say that having that on the certain level, be focused on the technology, see how it can be helpful within different sectors of the economy. It is not only digital transformation or digital economy, but most of the sectors in our economy, they are touched or they are influenced by digital transformation. I think that's the answer, and we should cover maybe on the next panels or next meetings next year in Poland, also these economical aspects, because I think that investment funds, economical aspects, they are extremely important. Such without funds, without investment, there will be no digital transformation at all.
Thank you very much indeed, Krzysztof Schubert, for the moment. Let me move on to the country after Poland that will be hosting the IGF. That will be Ethiopia, and with us is Ahmedin Ahmed, the State Minister of Innovation and Technology for Ethiopia. Ahmedin Ahmed, let me ask you again, this question that I've been posing just now. Where do you see the internet right now? Where do you think it's going? And what does that mean for governance in the COVID-19 period?
Thank you, Jonathan. I would like to take this opportunity to thank on my behalf and the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Ministry of Innovation and Technology, to take part in the 15th annual meeting of the Internet Governance Forum. Like anywhere in the world, as COVID-19 began to dominate our lives.
Ahmed, I think you are breaking up on your, can you hear me? You're breaking up on your signal. Perhaps I could ask you to turn your video off and speak to us just in audio only, then maybe the signal will be better.
So in the future, I believe in order to bring a lasting impact, we should focus on infrastructure and the end user. When we say the infrastructure, we should focus on the international and the national gateways, in increasing the capacity, in finding an innovative way to reduce the cost. We should focus on last mile access, and we should focus on standardizing our data center for local content delivery. The second that we should focus on is the end user. We should work on improving digital literacy, because the COVID-19 is impacting all the sector, as mentioned by the previous speaker, and Ethiopian government is working a lot in digital literacy initiatives. And within this framework, we do have a national digital literacy initiatives and making affordable devices widely available. In line with we do have regulations, e-transaction proclamation. So in line with this proclamation, we should encourage the use of digital and online payments in the future. So from the policy perspective, initially the policy framework should focus on exhaustively utilizing internet increasing accessibility for sustainable development and prosperity. And the second one is policies that help governments to focus on quality of education, and avail the education system with additional contents that help to shape the future, and policies that help governments for the internet economy that results faster economic growth and better living standard is a very important thing. And of course, we should focus on future industries such as artificial intelligence, big data, the Internet of Things, cybersecurity, and coding and human rights issues related to the mentioned advanced technologies. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much indeed. And the sound was very good. Thank you in the end. So thanks for persevering with that. Let us move on to the next country. Russia will be hosting the IGF in 2025. Maxim Pashin is with us, the Deputy Minister of Digital Development, Communications and Mass Media for the Russia Federation. Maxim Pashin, how do you see this question of the internet now, the internet of the future, and the governance issues that go along with that?
Заня.
Да, спасибо.
Хочу поприветствовать участников 15-го форума ООН по управлению интернетом. Сегодняшняя реальность...
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you very much indeed.
Большую часть наших повседневных активностей в интернет.
Well, the reality today is actually giving to us so many challenges. At the beginning of the pandemic, we started to take up various activities in order to provide full internet access to all citizens of Russia, as well as to increase the level of the quality of life. Internet has become a catalyzer of our contemporary life, and we use it in different systems. We believe that internet provides also excellent tools. It is also important for the provision of health services. At the same time, there is the new reality, and it is also connected with the accelerated digitization. It is bringing new challenges with itself, and we have different problems which are connected also with safety online, as well as personal data protection. We also have to fight against fake news, the misinformation. There is another question, whether the manner in which we manage internet today, we will be able to face up to all those challenges, whether we will be able to provide answers to global challenges. We are convinced that the response should be based on the principles of safety, security, and trust, with full respect for human rights, as well as with the respect for the state that has the right to manage its resources. We believe that it is necessary to develop a global document which will stipulate for the role of governments, civil society, businesses, that will draw up a position that will be actually focusing on a common approach. We have to fight against misinformation, fake news, which is also widespread via internet. In the United Nations, we should develop a structure that will be introducing norms and standards in the internet governance. This role can be played by the International Association, International Telecommunications Association. That is why we would like to propose to concentrate on the development of different mechanisms that will allow us to work in such a way so that our decisions were not just empty rhetorics. It is not going to be just declarations. We would like to note that Russia got the confirmation from the United Nations, and in 2025, we are going to organize the anniversary Internet Governance Forum of the United Nations. It's a great honor for Russia, and we are going to guarantee a broad participation of all the stakeholders in all the work of the forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister, for joining us. And just so everyone's aware, there is translation available, by the way. You'll find the translation buttons up there on the screen. Let's move on to another country now. Let's go to Latin America, and Vice Minister of National Planning and Economic Policy, Carlos Molina. Carlos, when you look at the challenges that Costa Rica faces, what are they? What are the unique challenges you're facing in this arena, and the challenges that Latin America is facing?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you around the world. Thank you for having us. Well, we have seen three areas when we have faced different challenges that are in education, work, and health. Evidence during our crisis has shown us a key issue regarding the relation among poverty and internet. Poverty related with income increased compared with the last register, but multidimensional poverty is stable. So we have good news on this one of the indicators. We showed it dropped. Household internet use dropped 5% compared with the last register from 20% to 15%. Considering public and private education is being driven through the web as well as remote working, internet literacy is a key driver for right access and protection. In case of women, the country has shown a reduction regarding the gap to the computer access, comparing male and female households. Nowadays, internet access has moved from computer use to other devices, so it's easier to bring internet to everyone. Our 2020 voluntary national review showed Also about SDG 4, quality education, the percentage of educational establishment with computer connected to internet for teaching purposes in elementary and high school increased significantly. And the current challenge is the capacity to already build is not being used due to confinement. So public investment should be considered remote internet access. Medical consultation is being done through telephone and internet by video conference. So access broadband internet is also crucial for health and service access. Digital gaps were already previous in this crisis. So the current situation has brought those gaps. Digital gaps add pressure to offer and demand in several markets, productive capabilities, and human skill for employment and production. And what we know right now is that digital transformation is irreversible. And that's why public investment should be around 1% GDP per year each country to get a social inclusion. Also, the countries should create digital market basket, including smartphones, tablets, computer, one device, plus internet plans. And as I mentioned before, work, education, and health depend entirely in this time, in this new normality on internet access. And internet is a key driver for the 2030 agenda implementation across all the SDGs. What are the financial alternatives for the region? Well, Latin America has a public financial constraints, so global finance target for digital inclusion can be crucial for those countries and to the world as a whole. Middle income countries have 70%, 75% of the population of the planet, and including India and China, and have 1/3 of the global GDP and have the 96% of the external debt of the development countries. So target finance for this digital inclusion can bring a global outcome for the 2030 agenda implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Vice Minister. Let's turn to Vera Songwe, the United Nations Under Secretary General and Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Africa. Vera Songwe, I mean, Africa has some very distinct challenges of its own. How do you see them? What are those unique challenges in terms of digitalization and governance that the continent is facing?
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and thanks for having me at this, I think, amazing and interesting conversation. BSG has just spoken, and you've heard a lot of what he said. But for Africa in particular, I think we have three things which we continue as the Economic Commission for Africa to focus on. The first one is increased connectivity. I think we've heard from everybody that has spoken about the importance of connectivity. But even when we have connectivity on the continent, it is too expensive. It's onerous and it's prohibitive. So there is many households, when we talk about access to connectivity, it does not necessarily imply real access because it's too prohibitive. So we need to bring down the cost. And then the third thing is speed. So it's connectivity, it's cost, and it's speed. I think we've just seen some of the demonstration of it. You know, on the continent, if you want to open a Google page, it takes you 2.5 minutes. If you're in the United States, it takes you 2 seconds. And that in itself is cost. It makes it more expensive to develop a business if your broadband is not fast enough and if you don't have the right capacities. So I think those are the three things that our governments need to focus on. But in addition to that, and I think one of the sort of horrifying statistics is the fact that almost half of the continent, or maybe a third of the continent, does not have an identity. And so even when they have access, they can't really participate in a meaningful way in any activities because they don't have an ID in countries that require identity. So one of the things we're working on is to see whether we can ensure in a much faster way that Africans and many more Africans have access to an identity card. And then of course, we've talked about the importance of digital technology, but there is a risk. And I think we continue to mention that, which is the digital divide. Those who have access will have more access, and those who have less access will have increasingly less, and societies will become even more unequal. And I think we see that particularly now in the education age, in houses where you can afford it, 7 people have access to the internet and everybody's on Google and it's working. Where you cannot afford it, even one person does not have access and it does not work. And so we need to ensure that we don't, with this movement to a digital age, exacerbate our inequalities. 7 of the most unequal countries in the world are in Africa. A few of them are in Carlos Molina's environment, but most of them we have the distinct pleasure on the continent to have 7 of the most unequal countries. We're hoping that the digital divide does not make that even worse, but hopefully closes it better. We at the Economic Commission for Africa have launched what we call the Digital Center of Excellence. We're working with the African Union, first of all, as I think Mr. Molina said, to ensure that we have the right regulatory environment, ensure consistency, ensure harmonization of rules and regulations across the continent. And then secondly, work particularly on digital privacy and ensure that, you know, with identification, we don't create more disunity and more chaos in our system. So I would stop there for now and we can come back as you continue this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Just one question, perhaps to follow up more. You know, one reason, of course, that Africa has many issues is lack of investment. Where do you think the investment comes from?
Thank you. That's a perfect follow-up question. One of the things we have just done, actually, I think we did it 2 weeks ago, is we launched an artificial intelligence center in Congo. And as part of that process, we actually worked with some of the largest telco companies on the continent and to create and launch a program called the African Communications and Informations Platform. And essentially what we're trying to do is bring together all the telecom companies, the large telecom companies of the continent, and we're now trying to do that in 36 countries, to come together and see the value in actually using the internet and technology as a means of getting closer to their service delivery clients. And I think that is where the private sector and the investment comes from. Governments need to ensure that the regulatory environment is predictable, that it is stable, and it clearly that when you come in, you can actually take repatriate your profits. What the private sector then needs to do is see where the benefits come from. And I think with the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, Africa has launched probably one of the largest investment programs in the world today. And therefore the private sector needs to come in. We have then, I think, multilateral development agencies and DFIs, the World Bank, the IMF, the EIB, Propaco. I think that can also buy down some of the cost of investment. And when you have that, you begin to get more private sector coming in. But when you look at Kenya, it is all about the accessibility, the effortlessness in which, you know, the business environment can exist. And I think once you have that, and then you have the basic enabling infrastructure, which is mostly public and private, then you get the rest that follows. We're thinking about launching 5G in 10 African countries. I have to say, when we launched it, we said 10 African countries. We now have about 20 countries calling us and saying, why didn't you pick my city? Tell me what I need to do to make sure that my city becomes part of the top 10. And I think when we do that, we can create emulation. And as you create emulation, a few more countries come together and you get the private sector. But it is all about the regulatory environment and the cost of capital, of course.
Thank you very much indeed, Vera. You know, it's a very interesting question. Certainly sitting here with my European Bank for Reconstruction and Development hat on, I believe that the private sector can be brought in. And also I believe the demonstration effect, what you call the emulation effect, is really, really very important as well. You know, I think demonstrating it can be done in some countries is a great way of showing others that they can follow down the same route. So Vera Songwe, thank you very much indeed. Finally, in this round, Henrietta Esterhuizen, the chair of the MAG. How do you see this, and what can the IGF really do for this question of governance going forward?
Thanks very much, Jonathan. And first, I have to take this opportunity to thank everyone who's contributed to making the virtual IGF 2020 a success. And that includes you, Jonathan. I also want to thank the future host countries, Poland, Ethiopia, Japan, and Russia. Well, to respond to your question, I think the IGF needs to always be aware that it doesn't exist in a parallel dimension. And the inequalities that we see on the internet mirror inequalities in the world. Conflict, dislocation, injustice. So the power of the internet to enable rights is immense. It can also enable harm, but ultimately, if we don't regenerate others, then the internet will remain also divided. So we cannot solve all the internet's problems on the internet alone. Secondly, I think we need to be bold. We need to recognize that there are real challenges and differences in approach to policy solutions. Regulation, for example, of large internet platforms. There are different perspectives on that. Taxation across borders. their differences of views in that as well. And then I think we really need to be inclusive. That's the third thing. I think the IGF needs to be inclusive of diversity of people, of ability, languages, and perspectives. I think we also need to become more inclusive of institutions, other decision-making fora, including governments, but also other institutions, regional institutions that deal with internet policy. And as the internet becomes more ubiquitous, more and more institutions that are not internet focused as their first priority are having to deal with internet-related policy issues. We need to bring them to the IGF. We need to listen to what their needs are, integrate their voices into the IGF conversation. And then finally, the IGF needs to strengthen its own processes, be willing to evolve, to build its own capacity and its relationships with the UN system and also institutions beyond that. But it must never, I believe, lose its uniqueness, its character as being inside the UN, but also separate, being bottom up, and having a community of people that are committing time and space to it, that volunteering time and space to it, and that use it as a strength or as a space for their conversation. So as we grow the IGF, into this part of this digital commons, to use a term that the Secretary General's roadmap uses, we need to retain that bottom-up character while also creating it into a more robust institution, you know, for want of a better word, that can interact more effectively and listen to policymakers around the world.
Rita, thank you very much indeed. But it's come a long way. You know, I think if I remember fondly being in Hyderabad all those years ago, you know, in 2008, something like that.
2008, you remember?
Was it? My memory's not as bad as I think at my age. And then again in Vilnius, you know, I mean, I think, you know, you see the IGF really growing all the time. And, you know, I think that's a great tribute to all the multi-stakeholder approach. So thank you to you for that. You're staying with us for the next panel as well. Let's move on to voluntary commitments. Now, I'd like to ask all of you in no more than a minute each, to make a voluntary commitment on behalf of yourself or the institution that you represent or the government you represent to furthering this whole area of work. And perhaps I could start with you, Christoph Schubert. What's your voluntary commitment that you would like to make?
So let me start with a comment that we are fully committed to the successful organization of the 16th edition of the IGF in Katowice between 6th and 10th December next year. Also, I would like to spend a few moments on the ideas of the IGF for the next year. So what we can expect, and maybe it will be a good moment to share with you the ideas and also welcome all your suggestions as well. So as Poland, we wish to more deeply involve the youth community into the IGF process. So particularly in order to listen their voice regarding the challenges they face, for instance, concerning education and employment, but also dealing with the psychological effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, which I think is very important. Moreover, building up on the current very good experience, we welcome the continuation of the parliamentarians' involvement in IGF. So our colleagues from Germany launched this, let's say, project last year, and we wish to continue this good practice in cooperation with other institutions and entities as well. We wish to involve as well the 2022 IGF host, which is Ethiopia, in this, and use this joint effort to deliver an interesting agenda for 2021, and at the same time seek continuation in Ethiopia, which I think make a lot of sense. Based on the IGF opening panel, which I had the pleasure to co-moderate, so I think that environmental issues in the era of transformation, digital transformation, might be very interesting to continue as well. Especially that the environment topic has not been the key issue at the IGF agenda so far. So it's also a very good point I think we can make. Last but not least, we have been thinking on bringing completely maybe or a bit new communities into the IGF, like for example, to propose the broader involvement of programmers and gamer communities into the IGF. Just to let you know, at the time that Poland has recently won the EU Code Week 2020, so we can bring maybe some experience and share with others. And maybe the good area to discuss would be as well funds, investment, and general discussion on recovering economies after COVID crisis, using digital transformation and digital technologies. So it might be interesting to cover as well. So that's the perspective and the ideas from my side. And I hope to see you all in the fourth quarter 2021 physically, hopefully in Poland. Thank you.
I look forward to being there physically. Thank you
yes.
very much indeed, Christoph. But let's move to Ahmadine Ahmed. Hopefully you're still with us from Ethiopia. Your voluntary commitment, either on behalf of yourself or indeed your country.
Thank you, Jonathan. As mentioned earlier, the challenges has to be addressed, and solutions could be provided at 3 levels. The international collaboration, Ethiopia is engaging in many international collaboration, and that will be one of the biggest steps for the IGF contribution. Regional solutions such as the internet boundaries to get reduced costs, and the content delivery networks will be another contribution for the IGF. When it comes to the country-specific solution, the case of Ethiopia, our government has approved digital transformation strategy back in June 2020, which is Digital Ethiopia 2025. So we are going to have IGF 2022 within this, implementing the digital transformation strategy. And this digital transformation strategy fix most of the problems we witnessed during the pandemic. Some of this may be the liberalization of the telecom network. The privatization and liberalization is one important issue, and this will be one important contribution. Deregulation of the mobile phone market to make them affordable. The upgrading of the existing government network to increase access to the network, to standardize the data center, as well as in facilitating the implementation of enablers for the digital economy. Ethiopia is implementing a national ID. Ethiopia is expanding the cybersecurity potential, and as well as the regulation for mobile money. And I think these things will be a huge contribution in expanding the e-government and the electronic commerce services, and creating enabling policies and regulations such as the Startup Act, which is going to be approved soon by the House of People Representative. We do have an aggressive national digital literacy initiative in Ethiopia, and promotion of the innovation and the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And of course, another very important thing is improving the availability of electric power in terms of power generation, distribution, and coverage, because that is one of the challenges. And I hope we will be committed to solve this problem for IGF 2022. And our government is working to ensure this by investing in different renewable energy sources across the country, including the hydroelectric power, which is the Great Ethiopia Resource Dam, GERD, and the geothermal power and solar power sources. And I hope to see all in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, in 2022 for IGF.
Thank you very much, Ahmadine Ahmed, for that. Maxime Pashin, Deputy Minister of Digital Development, Communications and Mass Media of the Russian Federation. Your voluntary commitment on behalf of yourself or your country.
Thank you.
Maxime Pashin, are you there? Doesn't look as though he is at the moment. We will move on. Carlos Molina, perhaps I could turn to you in Costa Rica for your voluntary commitment.
Well, our voluntary commitment is in behalf of my country. Costa Rica is a small country that dream big and act bigger. We protect our 25% territory as a national park. Our energy is almost 100% sustainable. And we abolished the army many years ago. Next year, we are gonna celebrate 200 years of being a republic. So our commitment is to create what we have called the bicentennial education network. That means guarantee 100% access to all the students, high school, primary, and university students, in order to no left, no one behind. That is our most important issue, because digital access is not a goal itself. It's something that has been done in order to accomplish all the goals, all the projects, all the policies that we have.
Carlos Molina, thank you very much indeed. Vera Songwe, perhaps I could ask you for your voluntary commitment.
I will make 3 commitments. I think the first one is with the Africa Communications and Informations Platform, we already are able to identify, locate, and talk to over 700 million devices, not people yet. And we're hoping that with this, we can maybe help accelerate the spread of digital identity across the continent. So that's our first commitment, is to see how using that platform, and already because we're in those houses, ensure that we can provide better identity. The second commitment that we would like to make is, of course, to ensure that the digital divide is not gender biased. And so we would like to target particularly young girls and ensure that they can become programmers, they can have access to the internet, and that they can also develop. And finally, intellectual property rights. I think one of the amazing things about the digital age is that the new commodity is ideas. But we have to make sure that we can protect Africa's ideas, and we have to make sure that there is a system and there's a regulatory environment in place that allows us to do that. So as the Economic Commission for Africa, we're working very hard to ensure that the ideas, the innovation, because Africa wants to use these devices, but we also want to create tools that can be used on these devices. But for us to do that, we need to protect our innovations. And so creating an IPO agency on the continent that allows young Africans to protect their innovation and maybe create the next unicorns for the world is our next commitment. Thank you.
That would be a good thing to see. Thank you very much indeed, Vera Songwe. Henrietta Esterhuizen, your commitment.
Jonathan, thanks. To work with the IGF community and structures, including the multi-stakeholder advisory group and the UN, to build a parliamentary track that does more than just come together once a year, but that actually engage. And then I think secondly, and this is actually part of this, to respond to the opportunity presented by Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation to strengthen the IGF as a platform for policy making, for public participation, and to strengthen the IGF's relationships with other institutions, including national governments. And to evolve the IGF's existing mechanisms, the best practice forums, and the dynamic coalitions to become more effective and have more impact. And ultimately to retain the IGF's bottom-up and open character. In fact, not just to not lose it, but to make it even more inclusive and diverse, and a place that is safe for debate, safe for dissent, safe for being creative and finding solutions.
Henrietta, thank you very much indeed for that. And you'll join us in a few minutes for the next panel as well. We have one more voluntary commitment, and that comes from Japan. Japan, of course, is the host of the IGF in 2023. We have a video from Ryota Takeda, the Minister for Internal Affairs and Communications.
ご来賓の皆様、日本国総務大臣の武田良太です。この素晴らしい今年の IGF を締めくくるにあたって、私から一言申し上げる機会をいただけることを光栄に思うとともに、この危機下で初めてのオンラインの IGF を成功裏に開催された国連事務局やマルチステークホルダー、アドバイザリーグループ、そしてセッションの企画や議論に貢献されたすべての参加者、一人一人に敬意を表します。私たちはこの新型コロナウイルス感染症の流行によってインターネットの持つ力を再認識しました。この危機下であってもインターネットは世界中の人々をつないで生活や経済を維持するとともに国連の掲げる SDGs を達成するための基盤となっており、 今やインターネットに接続できているかどうかが人々の命にさえ関わる事態にもなっています。社会が今回の危機から回復し、新たな日常の中でも持続可能な成長を続けるには、今年の IGF のテーマの一つにある通り、すべての人々がインターネットにつながり、安心してデジタル社会に参画できるようにすることが重要です。一方で、インターネットが社会や経済に浸透することに伴って、プライバシーやセキュリティなど、さまざまな課題が現れているのも事実です。それらの課題に対処し、インターネットに対する信頼を強化することは、より自由なデータの流通を可能にし、分断のない一つのインターネットの発展を実現するために極めて重要です。世界中の人々のインターネットの利活用を促進し、信頼性のある自由なデータ流通を推進するため、総務省は今年の IGF においてもオープンフォーラムを主催し、好評を得ました。このようにインターネットにまつわるさまざまな課題の解決に向けて、自由闊達な議論を行う場として、IGF の果たすべき役割は、今ますます大きくなっています。そうした中で、これまでのインターネットガバナンスの議論を牽引してきた IGF の機能をさらに強化する IGF プラスが、グテーレス事務総長から提案されました。私はこの提案を強く支持します。インターネットは特定の立場の者がトップダウンで管理するのではなく、さまざまな関係者が対等に運営に参加するべきです。IGF は世界中の人たちがオフラインやオンラインで一堂に会して議論する、まさにマルチステークホルダーアプローチを体現する場です。IGF の場で全ての関係者が互いに学び、理解し合うことで、より良いインターネット空間の発展が可能になると私は確信しています。我が国は2023年に IGF を開催します。マルチステークホルダーによる議論をさらに発展させ、行動に移すことで、包摂的で革新に富んだインターネットの発展に貢献してまいりたいと思います。ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Ryoto Takeda, thank you very much indeed for sending us that video. And a big thank you to all of our panelists on panel one for the first part of our discussion this evening. It was very kind of you to join us from all over. And now we move on to panel two. And I will let me just introduce the panelists. We are going to be discussing in panel two how can we cooperate more effectively in the digital world to enable us to better face global challenges and opportunities in the next decade. That is the topic we're now moving on to. Our panel are Tuomas Hendrik Ilves, the former president of Estonia, Fabrizio Hochschild, the Undersecretary General and Special Advisor on preparations for the 75th UN anniversary, Vint Cerf, Chief Internet Evangelist of Google, Goran Marbi, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, ICANN, the Chief Executive and President of that organization, Valerie Liega, Youth Representative from Kenya, Matt Skranrit, the Director General of GSMA, and Henrietta Esterhuizen is still with us from the chair of the MAG, the IGF Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group. Let me start, if I may, with Undersecretary General Fabrizio Hochschild. He needs to speak first. He does have another appointment, sadly, to go on to. So let's go to you first, Fabrizio. How can we ensure that the IGF remains relevant and responsive to this quite fast-moving digital environment?
Well, thank you. I think at the starting point, we have to have a common agreement on what the challenge is. And I would argue, based on listening to many, especially during these days, that the root of today's challenge in making the most for all, and especially for the least advantaged of digital technologies, is what some have referred to as the pacing challenge. And that's the discrepancy between having a technology that has never, ever spread and penetrated the lives of so many people in such a short time. There's no historic precedent. There's nothing that comes even close. In barely 25 years, this has transformed lives of half the globe. That's never happened before. And of course, policymakers, those responsible at a national, regional, or international level for promoting the global good through policy setting, through governance, through the rule of law, have had a very hard time keeping pace and steering these technologies. I think there's also, you know, in the rather libertarian origins of the internet, there's an assumption that governance is somehow the enemy of freedom or the enemy of innovation. I mean, Jonathan, you'll be familiar with the lesson of Lord of the Flies. The absence of governance, more often than not, the absence of the rule of law, more often than not, is not freedom and innovation, but tyranny and domination of the most strong, tyranny and domination of those who profit from an absence of the rule of law. And we've seen that. We've seen that in the scams. We've seen that in the rise in child abuse in the internet. We've seen that in the interference in our politics. We've seen that in the rise of human rights violations and surveillance of human rights defenders. We've seen that in many different aspects that go hand in hand with the huge benefits the digital bring. So I think the challenge for all governance mechanisms, including the IGF, is to keep up, is to move forward at a similar speed and with similar impact. And in concrete terms, I think what that means for the IGF is to continue on the road, and it has made important strides forward, of becoming more inclusive by region, more inclusive by stakeholder group, having civil society, but also better representation of business and government, especially from the global south, and also being better linked to other governance mechanisms. Internet governance is inevitably decentralized and will always be decentralized, but we have to have better, stronger interlinkages and more impact. So definitely bottom up, as Annette emphasized, but bottom up cannot be an end in itself. Bottom up creates legitimacy, but legitimacy for impact. And for that, next to being bottom up, we also need much stronger leadership, as the Secretary General emphasized. I think we also need more stable funding and a stronger comms capacity. And then I think we also need to progressively transform this from a one-off important event to a process that happens throughout the year and can also have a say on developments as they unfold. The internet moves by the second. We cannot move in a once-a-year format. So those would be my suggestions, and I know much excellent work is being done in this direction, and my pledge is to continue to support that work.
Fabrizio, thank you very much indeed, and a very good point about the pace of change compared to the pace of an annual meeting. That's the first time I've also heard of the Lord of the Flies being connected to the internet, but I like the analogy very much. Thank you. I wish you well with your next appointment. Thank you for joining us on this event. I'd like to go to Thomas Hendrik Ilves next, because we've just heard there from a UN representative. And I wonder, Thomas Hendrik Ilves, how you feel, you know, what you feel really the UN and the IGF need to do to take all this forward.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I am glad the UN has actually convened the IGF, but I agree that it should be much more of an ongoing process. Certainly, there have been a lot of new and intriguing ideas, but I'd like to focus on how we can cooperate more. Why, am I not unmuted? I thought I was.
Okay. We're hearing you well.
Okay, well, I just got a little pop-up here. I mean, the challenge that we have to really face is how to expand the possibilities of the internet to the rest of the world. I don't know if we understand how crucial it is. We get bogged down in a lot of like trivial questions, but I think we need to know that now, these days, just as the development in the 19th and 20th century was a function of physical infrastructure from highways to telephone connectivity. In the digital era that we have entered, sometimes even unwittingly, we need to move from mere physical infrastructure to the software of development. I mean that quite literally. Of course, we need broadband coverage and to build out the last kilometer of our fiber networks. But far, far more important than that, as well as our interminable discussions on synergies, multi-stakeholder processes, and sustainable solutions for a broad mix of interrelated issues, all in quotes, we require the developing world to be quickly able to adopt secure software infrastructure, including digital identities, to employ effective open source architecture and to guarantee data integrity including privacy. And all of this is technically possible already today. Indeed, it has existed for 2 decades. And if we do this, we will move from talking about guaranteeing human rights online to actually implementing them, especially in privacy and data integrity, which lie at the heart of human rights in the age of the internet. These are not just words. These solutions exist. They are not overwhelmingly expensive. Indeed, we are still able to take advantage today of Moore's law, which says the cost of computing halves every 1.5 years. That is gets half the cost in 1.5 years. It would be 13 times, I repeat, 13 times cheaper to build my country's complete digitization of governance today than it was when we did it as a not very rich country 20 years ago. And in doing so, guarantee freedom and human rights online. I mean, I should say in my country, there are only 3 things you cannot do online. You cannot get married, you cannot get divorced, and you can't sell or exchange real estate or property. So, I mean, all of this is a sine qua non if we're to safely implement responses to COVID-19, where privacy and integrity become key issues. So that touches upon contact tracing, supply chain integrity of PPE, of respirators, and so on. And also, one hopes, most importantly, the safety of any vaccination and the supply chain for vaccinations. We have to know all of these things to avoid the kind of disasters we have seen in the past. So, I mean, there are solutions. When I say, what can we do? I mean, in my country, we actually offer these solutions for free. I mean, we just give away the software and it's been taken up by some 30 countries around the world. I mean, you have to do a lot yourself, obviously, but these things are not that expensive and you can actually make huge moves in these areas if we actually decide to do them, have the political will to create national identity or identities, digital identities, secure using 2-factor authentication, end-to-end encryption, to have a secure architecture. And there are many models of that, and to employ the most modern technologies of distributed ledgers, also known as blockchain, to guarantee the integrity of data. So I would say that on the tech side, we don't have that many blocks or sort of huge steps to take. We can do these things today, and I think that the UN really is the place to do that. I should also say that, I mean, the UN is the one place we really need to work on avoiding the fragmentation of the internet. Allowing the internet to split based on different countries' understanding of access to information will recreate the divisions in the world that we lay to rest with the end of the Cold War. And in the time since then, access to information and global connectivity has transformed billions of lives. But none of this would have been achieved without a globally interoperable internet connecting all of us. So we need to preserve that, and that's something that really should be a strong role for the UN, especially now during the worldwide health crisis, where we have seen that global connectivity has helped us stay connected during the pandemic and certainly decrease the damage in all our countries to the economy, thanks to self-isolation and quarantining. So, basically I'll say that we're at an important juncture right now, where we need to be guided by our core values. When advancing internet government issues, we must find ways to protect human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in the digital age. It will be equally important to improve the trust and confidence in the internet, much of which you can do through technological means that guarantee trust and confidence. So I'd say the bottom line is the internet must serve the citizen first, and only then governments and corporations, while the values of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights remain just as important today as they did in 1945. And I'm confident the new upgraded Internet Governance Forum will be able to find a global consensus on maintaining a free, open, accessible, and decentralized Internet. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Thomas Hendrik Ilves. It's very interesting thoughts there from a country that's certainly come a long way when it comes to global connectivity. And one of the youngest countries, so maybe we should go from that to our youngest panelist, Valerie Jaeger. You're here representing youth. I wonder what your vision is for the internet moving forward. What's it look like in 5 years' time, say 2025?
Thank you so much, Jonathan, and thank you to all the panelists and the attendees joining us on this platform and from other platforms as well. I think it's important for me to state that the youth are not a homogeneous group. They are different in terms of their diverse aspects of the regions they come from, the needs they have when it comes to internet governance. So with that said, looking into the future and the vision for young people in 5 years' time, first of all, some of the objectives that young people have coming onto the internet include things like business, human rights, climate action, education, jobs, and access to information, especially in the wake of the pandemic, where we've had so many people having to transition to the digital platforms. But just like the previous speaker had said in the first roundtable, that the issue of access also hits young people differently, because the issue of access for a young person in Africa would be different for someone else in a more developed country. And as we look into the youth moving into the future, we have to look at young people in terms of what they can meaningfully contribute onto panels like this or other meetings, as opposed to just tokenism. And that's why we're very grateful to the IGF for allowing a young person to sit on this panel. Earlier on, the representative from UNECA had spoken about how they're trying to do the work on digital identities and reach young women in the African continent. And it would be my pleasure to say that we have, as one of the ISOC ambassadors, Mauricia, who's dealing with gender. And what as young people would like to see in future is having institutions like the UN and other corporations, maybe private companies, also governments, incorporate the youth more to make meaningful contribution and to also be part of decision-making. With that said, we would also like to bring into light some of the youth initiatives that have come out very strongly, especially in this virtual IGF. We've seen the Youth Coalition on Internet Governance, one of the dynamic coalitions that is youth-led, coming out strongly to have their own session proposals to mentor ambassadors from the Internet Society. We've seen Digital Grassroots and the work they're doing in African countries to be able to just bring more youth on board when it comes to internet governance. We have seen what young people are doing in their regional and local NRIs to just be able to make sure that the youth are more involved, they are aware, they are learning about internet governance so they can also meaningfully contribute. And I liked what the Minister for Poland said when they said that they would want to work more with young people in the next IGF, because that is what as young people we are looking forward to, because we are looking forward to be able to be part of the organization, be part of the session proposals, be part of the panels where it is not only youth or young people sitting on those panels, but they are sitting together with decision makers who can actually make impact. With that said, we've also heard a lot about how young people are now thinking globally but acting locally. And with this, I would like to also mention the working groups that have been developed by the German Information Society, led by Elizabeth Schaumann. And it actually brings together young people globally to discuss on pertinent topics, such as fair businesses, the intersection of tech and environment. And it's very important for us as stakeholders, for us as the global internet community to be able to see what the young people are doing so that we can be able to incorporate them in the right spaces. Also now we are seeing young people bringing into context the problems they're seeing on the internet. So issues such as encryption, issues such as human rights violations. And I like what Andrea had said earlier about making the Internet Governance Forum a safe space where people can come, human rights defenders can come and sit on these panels with the government and discuss the human rights violations. We've seen what is happening in Nigeria, and we've seen how the young people were able to organize in a community setup using the internet and just being able to create that awareness and what can be done. we are seeing issues of internet shutdowns, and we are seeing young people organize themselves in the same thing. Lastly, I'd like to talk about youth mentorship. More than ever now, we are seeing young people for young people in terms of bringing them onto the internet governance space. Before, it would always just be a struggle between can we be included in this panel? What are we doing about it? But I'm happy to report that young people are now bringing other young people into the space and allowing them also have their voice heard, giving them an opportunity to learn about what are the pertinent issues of young people. And with that said, of course, we would like to just appreciate some of the internet mentors who are young people who have gone before us. We'd like to talk about Jaewon Son from Korea. We'd like to talk about Lily Edinam, Noha from Egypt. These are young people who have been in these spaces and are creating more space for young people to come online. Yes, and we'd also like to just finally, as I close up, some of the national schools of internet governance that have actually played a key role in bringing more and more young people in terms of just educating them on what internet governance is. And of course, I would just like to share the experience of what Internet is doing in Kenya in terms of the Kenya School of Internet Governance and how they're using that space to ensure that the youth are well equipped to meaningfully contribute to the Internet Governance Forum. So going forward, Jonathan, we are going to see more of young people in these spaces. We are going to have more young people have a position when it comes to the Internet Governance Forum. Thank you.
Okay, that's very good to hear. Thank you very much indeed, Valerie, for joining us. Let me turn to Vint Cerf as Chief Internet Evangelist for Google. There are so many priorities, Vince, so many things to do. What do you think should be the #1 way forward if we're to make progress in this area?
Well, let me thank you so much, Jonathan. Let me start out first by simply congratulating the IGF team on the technical success of this event. And not only the web pages were amazing, they were so helpful from my point of view in organizing everything. And of course, this online conference has also been striking, including the interpretation capability, which I really appreciate. Let me come to a sort of a primary expression to answer your question. I think that making the internet safe while preserving the openness that has produced this cornucopia of applications is our primary challenge. How do we make it safe? And of course, there may be varying definitions of what people consider safe, but I think if I were an engineer, I would be asking questions like that. If I were a policymaker, I would be asking myself the same kinds of questions. Second, fragmentation, which has come up frequently in today's and earlier conversations, is a real threat. And it will destroy the benefits of the internet, which are largely derived from the free flow of information across international boundaries. So we need to do everything we can to avoid the harmful effects of fragmentation. The third thing is that the multi-stakeholder dialogue, I think, is still vital for the production of good quality policy. And that includes things like asking the man in the street or the woman in the street, as the Mission Publique has managed to do with its multi-country questions to ordinary citizens, asking them about what they think of the internet, what concerns they have, and what aspirations they hope for. I have to say that Secretary General Guterres' comments were strikingly comprehensive, and I think he expressed them extraordinarily well. The term digital sovereignty has also come up with some frequency, and it's a very attractive term, but I worry that it could be misunderstood and misinterpreted to foster fragmentation. So I agree that we need to seek local solutions to local problems, but not at the expense of destroying the interoperability of the computers and the networks that make the internet useful. Last point I would make is that our task now, as many have already emphasized, is to achieve broad, sustainable, useful, safe, affordable, and inclusive access to the internet while protecting human rights and keeping the internet open. Thank you.
Jonathan, you are muted.
Hello, hello. Yes, Vince, thank you very much indeed. Just one quick follow-up, Vince, which is I saw you looking very intently when we heard earlier from Africa, this whole question of, 2.5 minutes to open a Google page in Africa, 2 seconds in the United States. How do you resolve a problem like that?
Well, actually, we tried to do some things technically to deal with that. One of them was called AMP, which makes the ads load more quickly, encoding schemes and other things. But the real answer to that problem is more bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
So we've made some contributions there in Kampala, Uganda. We built a wholesale fiber network. I think we've done something similar in Accra, in Ghana. And we tried to demonstrate that wholesale tactics, which allow for a resale of capacity, is a tactic. Certainly, one could also argue that improved wireless access to the internet, whether it's 4G or 5G or Wi-Fi, also contributes to solving that problem. But the real answer is investment in capacity and driving cost out, which was a very important point made earlier, to make these things affordable for everyone.
Vince, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's move on to Goran Marbi from ICANN. And Goran, really the same sort of question that I put to Vince, which is so many priorities, what's your priority?
Firstly, thank you very much. And there's always a hard call to follow Wint, representing the technical community, because a lot of the things I would say is just repetition what he talks about. But I think that a lot of the comments here, I would like to take a step back, because the first thing, how do you be more effective and the global challenge? You have to define the problem. And I think the IGF has talked a lot about it. One of the problems is the amount of connectivity in the world, and especially in places where it doesn't have it today. And Wint just made a good case for that, of course, and that's part of it. But I think that one thing that is important to remember is that how do you define the internet itself? I mean, the way I define it, and we from the technical community define it, is the fact that the internet doesn't really exist as an entity. The internet is thousands and hundreds of thousands of different networks. What we contribute to is the sort of language that makes it possible for people on all those devices, on all those different networks, to communicate with each other. That is the internet for me. There's the interoperability to it. And what a lot of the questions that arise when we talk about fake medias and all those things that is happening is sort of happening not inside the internet itself. It happens inside a social media platform. And I use them all. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's negative. It's just that when you leave, when you walk into a social media platform, you actually do leave the internet itself. You're inside someone else's computer. And I think that we sometimes miss that small but fairly important factor into this. So, I mean, if there are things to be happening inside that closed environment, I think that the governments, around the world are reacting to that and doing that. But that's very different from this ability for you to go on your particular network with your ISP or Wi-Fi or mobile or whatever you're using, and you can connect to me here. So, I mean, that leads to something quite interesting as well, because we often talk about the internet as a fantastically global thing, and it is fantastic and it is global, but it's also very local. And one of the things I see when we look in it is that when you actually use internet, I mean, when my daughter wants to communicate with me, she's very local. She's often in the same sofa or in the next room. She communicates on a social media platform with me, which is, it's very typical. The traffic is very, very local. And what we're seeing now, to be able to really make people the opportunity to go online, is that we actually turn this global device into something local. Internet has to be the ability to be local and global at the same time. So that's why we're inside ICANN, for instance, is working a lot what we call IDNs, which is another word of saying that people should be able to use a keyboard. They actually understand what is on them. The symbols on that should be something that they actually understand. They don't need to be forced to read from left to right with a dot in the middle, because many scripts doesn't even have a dot. So because I think people are smart. And we often talk about, so coming back to the investment part, I worked in the industry as well, and I also worked as a telecom regulator. I know one thing: it's much more easy to have investments if someone wants to buy it. There needs to be a demand for what you do. And I think that people, in many regions around the world, to be able to see that demand, wants to have the localized internet through platforms or through whatever else, but they should be able to do that. So what we're doing a lot right now is working and increasingly working in different forums just to push on the fact is that we think that people to be able to take the next step internet needs to be localized. So, but then again, it's one common language for all those networks. So we have to make sure that we don't create alternatives to what we call the internet because you want to do something very, very local, because then you actually do fragmentize the internet and takes away the whole idea behind the internet, which is actually about connecting people. So I think that, and I think this conversation, I mean, I followed the discussions on IGF, and I agree, this has been a success not only from a technical perspective, but also from a perspective of actually people coming together, because more and more those discussions is becoming more in-depth. What are the real problems? What are we talking about? How do you create this connectivity? How do you make it global and local at the same time? So, and I see new discussions in new forums, and we from the technical part of this, who supply, we have a very simple task. We have a very focused task. We provide a service to the world, but that actually makes it possible for you to connect. That's everything we do. And I think that recognition has been coming up during this conversation, because then we can actually start talking about the problems. It's not the internet. It's often everywhere else that the problems might exist. And that I think that it's an important discussion to continue to. Thank you very much.
Goran, thank you very much indeed. And let me turn now to Mats Granrud. Mats, similar sort of area really. What's the one thing that really needs to be done to foster cooperation between countries, particularly some of the more economically challenged countries, perhaps?
Great pleasure to it's a great pleasure to be here with you, and Göran, as a fellow Swede, I feel a little bit sorry for you and your daughter. You might want to talk to each other on the couch instead of sending text messages, but hey, that's up to you. So I represent the mobile industry, and we are committed to the preservation of the collaboration model for internet governance and decision making. Today, the mobile industry, we connect roughly 2/3 of everyone on this planet, and we contribute some $4.1 trillion to the global GDP. Now, this brings some serious responsibility, and especially this year when mobile connectivity has been so vital to all of us to continue to do business and live our normal lives. But the area of digital cooperation that really needs our attention is the persistent digital divide. We know that today, roughly 50% of the world's population is connected to internet, and 50% is not. And the 50% that is connected through a mobile device or through a mobile internet, as has been described before. So roughly 4 billion people are still not connected to internet. And we think this is more important and maybe the biggest challenge that we're facing ever. So the 4 billion people that is not connected is the sum of two things. Number one is the coverage gap, which means that people who live outside of areas of mobile broadband networks. And mobile broadband, we define as 3G or 4G or 5G to some extent. And this coverage gap is roughly 700 million people. The second area is the usage gap, where people live in areas covered by mobile broadband, but they decide or choose not to use it. So the mobile industry, we have made strong progress against the coverage gap in the last 5 years or so by investing huge amount of money, some $320 billion in networks, which has brought 1 billion more people online. So that's good, but it's not good enough. So today I call for a greater attention and action to reduce the big gap, the usage gap, by eliminating the barriers that we know exist and accelerating the mobile broadband use so we can bring people online and finally close this digital divide. So the usage gap is currently roughly 3.4 billion people. And the main barriers is, as been discussed earlier, affordability, lack of skills, digital skills, and I think honestly that's a small one, but still lack of digital skills, safety and privacy concerns, and maybe most importantly, lack of local relevant content. There's simply nothing there for me to use. If the current trend continues, over 40% of people in low and middle income countries will remain offline by 2025. For these people, there is only one way, mobile, of getting online and receiving life-changing opportunities. The mobile industry, we will invest some $1.1 trillion in networks from now to 2025 to build out capacity and installing new 5G equipment, as Wendt talked about earlier. I urge our partners, public and private, to invest at the same level to bridge the big gap, namely the usage gap. There has never been a more crucial time to bring people online and advance the SDGs to full completion by 2030. 2020 has reinforced the connection between technological advancements and human progress. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much indeed, Mats, for that. Finally, in this round, Amrita Esterhuizen, you're still with us. What do you think the IGF can do to further this digital cooperation now?
Thank you, Jonathan. It's challenging to add to all the relevant points that have been made. I think I'll start by saying the IGF should not underestimate the complexity of the problems and the complexity with the difficulty in finding consensus. I think that is important. And I think the IGF is designed to deal with complexity. But I think we don't always agree, even if we understand what the problems are. For example, there are different views on how to protect the public good character of the internet and how to strengthen it. You know, I've touched on this before, and I think Fabrizio did as well. There are different views on the internet as a tool for democracy and human rights. There are states who feel that the internet creates a platform for challenging regimes, and they are not comfortable with that. And then there are masses of citizens who use social media to criticize government, and they feel empowered by that. And actually, often these different stances do come into conflict. And I think when it comes to access, also, it's not so simple. I think we actually know what the solutions are. We know that we need dynamic spectrum regulation. We know that mobile penetration, as Mats have just said, is leveling off. We also know that community networks is a viable solution, small businesses. We know that we need public access and public sector investment in skills and in content, and yet these things are still not happening. Community networks are viable, but they often lack the licenses. They're enabling financial investment frameworks. So I'm not being cynical here at all. Actually, I'm just saying that finding these solutions involve, as President Ilves said earlier, they involve political will. And I don't think it's always that easy to find that. And then to come back to the role of the IGF, and particularly the IGF Plus, we do need to strengthen cooperation at a global level within the digital internet community, but also beyond. But I believe very firmly that we also really need to strengthen cooperation at the regional level, the national level, and the local level. So I'm not sure if Fabrizio is with us, but I think bottom up is not just about legitimacy. Bottom up is about getting things done, because that is where the changes are made. That's where the cables are laid, when the networks are built, where the internet exchange points are put into place, where the skills are developed. They're developed on the ground at the local level. And that nuts and bolt element of the internet, yes, it can be encouraged from a global level, but ultimately it has to happen at a local, national and regional level. And I think the IGF and its national and regional initiatives really can play a role to support that. So let's build on that, and let's continue to do that. Let's not simplify it, but let's also be hopeful and inspired and brave.
Henrietta, thank you very much. Yes, and the local challenge is clearly very, very important. Right, now it's time to have some voluntary commitments from this panel. I'd like to think about what voluntary commitments you'd like to make, either on behalf of yourself or your organizations or your countries. Thomas Hendrik Ilves, perhaps I should start with you. A voluntary commitment you would like to make very briefly. Oh, you're muted. As an expert of unmuting myself, I can tell you you need unmuting.
I have to do it twice here, apparently. But anyway, well, the E-Governance Academy of Estonia, which I'm on the board, has for some 20 years already been teaching people from all over the world, mainly government officials, on the basics of digitization. And we've also sent people wherever needed when requested. The government's funding of it is probably enough to maintain people coming to us if they get there by themselves, but with money from or funding from the European Union and from other international organizations, we also send people to assist in long-term digitization projects around the world. The goal being that learning the basic skills and I have to say this is not really basic in terms of how does the internet work. It's what are the essentials of a secure digital identity, what you need to do, on what kind of architecture you need to set up. And once you do that, moving on to data integrity issues. But we do that, and it's especially since at least the solution that we use in my country is open source, non-proprietary software. That's all kind of free, but what it does require is that countries themselves commit to build these things out once we show how to do it. And as I said, we've done it in about 30 countries, and the E-Governance Academy is always happy to assist countries that are genuinely interested in digitizing public and private and government services for their citizens.
Thank you very much indeed, former President of Estonia. Let me move on to our youngest panelist, Valerie Jaeger. I hope you're still there. And Valerie, perhaps you'd like to tell us what you would like to commit to.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll answer that question in twofold: what I would like to commit to, and also what, on behalf of the youth, we would like to commit to as well, is that there will be more bold representation of young people in the IGF processes, in decision making in terms of organization of the IGF, and also in sessions that actually are meaningful and have impact. Also, you're going to see a lot more local action from young people collaborating with their own regional and local initiatives. So definitely you're going to see more of the young people in this space. Thank you.
Valerie, thank you very much indeed. Vint Cerf, I hope you're still with us. A voluntary commitment you'd like to make?
So let me actually speak to two of them. The first one is that I promise that I will spend less time admiring the problem and a lot more time solving them. And I think it's very important that we share with each other things that work and things that have not worked, and explain why. What were the local conditions that made a difference? So that's my primary commitment. But I want to suggest another thing which Valerie's comment inspires in me. We should get more people involved in the problem solving because they're too young to know you can't do that.
I like both of those very much. All right. Thank you very much indeed, Vint. Yara Marby, your commitment.
I mean, first of all, I want to say that we will continue our commitment for the IGF. We think it's a very important platform for discussion, and it's a very important place for people to come together. The other thing is that, our commitment is that we are increasing our efforts to work together with software houses, equipment providers, and other ones who are essential to bring a more internationalized internet to local people, because technical things has to read technical things in the right way. And that is a commitment we're making. So you will see ICANN much more in different technical forums, in standardization forums, to just talk about how this could work to make anyone to be able to access internet using their own language and their own script. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And I move to your fellow Swede. Mats, perhaps you would like to make your voluntary commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm sort of into the Vint arena of listening to youths, young people, and learn from them, because they not only are they the future, as we know, but they also haven't done same mistakes that we have. So continue to listen to them and make sure that my fellow business leaders listen to them as well. That's what we're going to work on. Plus, of course, the industry will continue to build out networks, will continue to improve technology and bandwidth going forward. But it's the listen to the youth, I think, is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mats. Yes, it's a good one. And finally, Henrietta Esterhuizen, you've already made one voluntary commitment, but if you've got another one, we'd love to hear it.
I think just to promise that the IGF is intergenerational. I agree with Vint. Yes, it's good to get young people because they have the courage and they're willing to go where those of us who've been before know it might not work. But I think the intergenerational character of the IGF is as important. And I think, Jonathan, to work with those that support the IGF, and many of them are in this virtual.
You're freezing, Henrietta. Sorry, yeah.
Freezing. And just to bring in more people from outside the existing IGF bubble, so we have more creativity and more collaboration. That's it. And not lose the IGF community as we also strengthen our top-down leadership level character.
Okay, yes, we definitely got that message in the end. Thank you for persevering, Henrietta. And thank you to our panel on this particular section of our closing event. Some interesting thoughts from all of you. Thank you all for taking part. We do have two further voluntary commitments on video. The first is from Simonetta Sommaruga, the president of the Swiss Confederation.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, nous vivons une époque d'insécurité et d'incertitude.
Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, we live in the times of lack of security, and the digital tools are ever more important for our functioning. They allow us to function as societies. They allow us to organize, like today, virtual conferences, but they also allow us to work and learn online. We are, however, also more and more aware of the risk that is associated with digitalization. That risk takes the form of misinformation about coronavirus or cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, like, for instance, hospitals. And these vile acts, they can be a threat to human life. They violate human rights, including freedom of speech and freedom or right to health and well-being. It is obvious to us that we have to gain and maintain the trust of internet users. We have to encourage collaboration among various stakeholders, and we have to develop clear principles for governing the network. Digitalization should be in service of everyone. We have to make sure that the internet remains the space of freedom, security, and democracy. And in order to achieve that, we have to adapt the developed principles on the international level and then apply international law to the digital world. Our interests and views may differ, and that task is not going to be easy. Neither neither will it be able to be implemented quickly, but it's the only way to go. Over the last 2 weeks, the IGF have allowed us to hold multiple open and democratic discussions among all types of stakeholders, governments, parliamentarians, businesses, civic society, and the academia. It's a necessary dialogue, but in itself, it is not sufficient. We have to continue these actions, and we have to create a space where we can develop very clear principles. The roadmap of the UN Secretary focusing on digital collaboration is an important step towards better internet governance, enabling us to face the challenges ahead of us. Reinforcing the IGF in the form of IGF Plus will be the best way to start that evolution. We have to, first of all, fill the gap between expert discussion and decision makers. We also have to create, within this framework, a constant space that will bring together all key decision makers. Other than that, we support closer contact between IGF, operating on a global level, and its regional initiatives, national initiatives, and youth initiatives, like, for instance, Euro-DIG or the Swiss national IGF. The Swiss Genève International Initiative has it all to put its input into all these actions. Many institutions like the IGF Secretariat even now shape active governance of the over the digital space. Geneva Internet Platform is also a source of information, analysis, and support regarding all aspects of digitalization for all stakeholders. Switzerland would also like to have its share in the increase of trust in the digital area, using, for instance, the initiative of Geneva Dialogue for responsible behavior in cyberspace. This year, during IGF, for the first time, we had a session devoted to the environment, and we are convinced that the IGF can have its very important contribution into the interrelation between the two megatrends, digitalization and protection of the environment. And in this context, in order to have very specific contribution, the government of Switzerland will support under the IGF the creation of a pilot policy network devoted to the interaction between digitalization and the environment. In this way, we would like to continue working and increasing the number of actions in between annual sessions of IGF, at the same time contributing to the achievement of our overall goal, meaning protecting the environment. We hope to support the UN and its future representative for technical issues, as well as the IGF community worldwide, so that we can transform IGF into a more integrated and more efficacious tool for global collaboration in the spirit of IGF Plus, which was the appeal of the UN Secretary General. Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much indeed. And we do have another also voluntary commitment. We're going to hear from Brad Smith, President of Microsoft.
Hi, I'm Brad Smith, the President of Microsoft. I think this is a time that calls on the world to take urgent action. And it's a time that especially calls on those of us who work across the tech sector to step up and to do more. I think in part we need to use technology to make the world more accessible to everyone on the planet. That's why we at Microsoft have offered a concrete commitment in our Airband program to use new technology to reduce the cost and expand the reach of the internet through broadband. This is also a time that calls on us, I think, not just to think about giving people access to the internet, but providing them with the skills they'll need to make that access more effective, more important and productive for their own lives. Around the world, the jobs of the future increasingly involve more digital skills than in the past. That's why this year we at Microsoft stepped forward with a commitment that we will reach 25 million people before this year ends to provide the kinds of services that will connect people not just with skills, but with their next job. And finally, we need to recognize that one of the most important issues of this decade, and indeed every decade to come, is the needs of our planet to address climate change and sustainability more broadly. That's why at Microsoft, we've committed ourselves to be carbon negative by the end of this decade. That's why we've committed that by 2050, we will remove from the environment all of the carbon that Microsoft has emitted since it was founded in 1975. And it means that we are also committed to building a technology resource that will serve every part of the world, that will provide the kinds of tools that all of our customers will need to measure and monitor and ultimately reduce their own carbon emissions. It's why we're committed to building what we call a planetary computer, a global data set that every community and country and government can access to measure and monitor and manage their own biodiversity. More than ever, these are the challenges of our time, and more than ever, they require the work, the focus, the collaboration that comes from IGF. That's why we as a company are not just supportive of the Secretary General's call to make IGF even more important. It's why we are so committed ourselves to being an active participant and playing a critical part. Thank you very much.
Brad Smith, thank you very much, the president of Microsoft Corporation. Let's look ahead now to next year's IGF in the remaining minutes that we have. I'd like to call on Marek Zagorski, the Secretary of State at the Chancellery of the Prime Minister of Poland, to deliver some remarks about the 16th annual meeting of the IGF, which will be hosted by Poland, of course, next year, 2021.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished guests and participants of the virtual 15th IGF. If the famous Polish novelist and futurologist Stanisław Lem came back to being today, he would not be surprised to see us all sitting and talking in front of our computers. I mentioned him because next year we will celebrate the 100th anniversary of his birthday. Known especially for Soralis, over the last decades, he has become an inspiration not only for many science fiction enthusiasts, but also for the internet community. Let's just say this. Lem's Siberiada inspired the creators of many PC games, for example, The Sims. In the current situation, internet governance is the key to ensuring sustainable development, human rights, and global security. Thanks to the internet, we can safely meet online. The future, according to Lem, has come to meet as a present. We were supposed to meet on site in Katowice earlier this year, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic circumstances, unfortunately, we could not. However, this difficult time has brought us new experience, and although it was different, it was not towards. At the times when Lem was writing his novels, Katowice, a host city for the IGF 2021, was one of the most important locations on the coal mining map of Poland. Since that time, it has gone a long way to become a vibrant, modern city of new technologies and innovations. It is also now known for being a hub for the gaming industry and game enthusiasts. This is a feature that we would like to build on while organizing the next year's IGF between 6th and 10th December. I truly believe it will take place in its traditional on-site form. In December next year, we want you to have the opportunity to experience traditional Polish hospitality, taste the specialties of Silesian cuisine, and learn about the tourist attractions of this region. Our motto will still be Internet United, and IGF 2021 will be a platform of discussion on open, free, and the undivided internet, where users can enjoy their rights without endangering their privacy. That's the big idea, and we want to bring new communities to this. I especially address my words to the IGF. Please be with us next year. Your voice is crucial in this important debate, and we want to hear it. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, I would like to sincerely thank to the United Nations DESA and the IGF Secretariat for the commitment and efforts they put in preparing the 2020 online edition. Congratulations on the wonderful organization and the incredibly successful meetings. I'm very much looking forward to continuing our open dialogue on every level and dimension. In this difficult time, the IGF is for all of us a perfect place to conduct such a discussion and work out to good and effective solutions. The multi-stakeholder and inclusive spirit of the IGF forum is now our most valuable asset. On a practical note, myself and my colleague, Mr. Krzysztof Schubert, who is the Republic of Poland plenipotentiary for United Nations IGF, and of course the whole team in Poland involved in IGF 2021 are at your disposal for any suggestions you might have regarding the next year's IGF in Katowice. See you all there. Thank you very much.
Marek Zagorski, thank you very much. I hope we will all be there physically as a sign of solidarity at this difficult time. Thank you very much indeed. Now, let's hear some closing remarks on this IGF. I call on Liu Zhenmin, the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs. He made a speech at the very opening session that I did. Now he delivers some closing remarks for us. Liu Zhenmin.
Thank you, Jonathan. Nice to see you again.
And you.
We met last week. Excellencies, distinguished participants, colleagues, and friends from around the world. I'm honored to join you with over 6,000 people from 173 countries gathering online at this year's Internet Governance Forum. This fits well into the motto of virtually together. Over the past days, through the online meeting, I'm very glad to see so many friends, both old and new. But it is also a stark reminder. The world continues to witness the devastating impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Societies are reeling from shutdowns, stay-at-home orders, and widespread and mounting infection. As a result, we are moving towards an increasingly virtual world, from social distancing to remote working and online learning. You heard from the Secretary General Antonio Guterres. The COVID-19 pandemic has shone a spotlight on the importance of digital technologies and transformation, and on the urgent need to enhance the role of IGF as a platform for dialogue on proposed solutions. The lively discussions are captured by the overarching theme of this year's IGF, Internet Governance in the Age of Uncertainty. My own takeaways of this year's IGF are, number one, that we can no longer separate the development tracks of digitalization and sustainable development. And number two, more than ever, we need a cross-fertilization and cooperation. These are critical for governance issues in data, environment, inclusion, and trust across borders, sectors, disciplines, and generations. We need to extend the multi-stakeholder approach to an all-stakeholder approach, and we need to continue integrating solutions and capacity building into the IGF. Distinguished participants, as we close the 15th IGF, we also crossed the halfway mark of its 10-year mandate, renewed by the UN General Assembly in 2015. Guided by the UN Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation, I will share the following 6 reflections on how we collectively can advance the IGF. First, on having a more focused agenda. The strategy to have selected themes and well-defined issues should continue. It sharpens our focus on what matters most and streamlines discussions and outputs of the IGF. We started last year in Berlin, and we continue at this virtual summit. We are going to continue in the coming years, starting from Katowice. There should also be continuity between annual sessions. We see, for example, the spotlight on data this year, building on the discussions last year in Berlin. Second, on integrating high-level leader track that involves ministers, parliamentarians, and other leaders. I'm encouraged by the dynamic exchange and the concrete policy recommendations that we heard at this year's high-level leaders track. They focus on the role of the internet and the digital technologies in responding to COVID-19 and uncertainties and how we can recover better. I'm equally encouraged by the active participation of parliamentarians from around the world and by the cooperation between parliaments and the dynamic coalitions that were forged at this year's parliamentary roundtable. We also make renewed efforts to report the outcomes of the IGF to the UN intergovernmental processes. Third, I'm forging stronger links among the Global Forum and the national, regional, and youth initiatives, or the NRIs. I would be remiss if I do not highlight the central role of IIAs in shaping the bottom-up inclusive nature of IGF. Even though the network of IRIs is expanding, national governments, legislators, and businesses can benefit from improved representation at the NRIs. I strongly encourage the global community to invest, contribute, and strengthen the role of the NRIs. The UN family, including the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA, is committed to work with all partners to provide more capacity development for the NRIs and in strengthening their collective work as a part of the global IGF ecosystem. Fourth, on integrating programs and intersectional work of the IGF, the relevance of the IGF's best practice forums and dynamic coalitions has been clearly proven. But we need to do more, establishing linkages and coherence between sessions, as well as with other intergovernmental and international bodies. Fifth, on the long-term sustainability of the IGF and its small secretariat rely on external funds to function well. During the pandemic, our donors continue to support us. I wish to extend a big thanks to all donors. I also thank the Polish government for their financial contribution to support this year's virtual IGF. Sixth, enhancing the visibility and identity of the IGF, I extend a special thanks to the Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office of the Government of the United Kingdom. They are generously supporting IGF in revamping its portal and underlying technology so that the IGF can better serve as a platform to the global community. The IGF will also benefit from an effective communications strategy in guiding its work starting 2021. Under the personal leadership and guidance of the UN Secretary General, let us work together to advance the implementation of his roadmap and to enhance the broad impact of a strengthened IGF. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 has caused loss of life, brought untold hardship and uncertainties to people around the world. At the same time, however, it has shone a spotlight on the possibilities of the new normal, which is more digital than ever. Not only is this the first ever virtual internet governance forum, indeed, allow me to mention other firsts. Half of the participants at this year's IGF, over 3,300, are newcomers. All high level and the main sessions are streamed for the first time over UN TV, receiving high visibility. Number three, not only are we joined by the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres himself, we also have the honor of having both the President of the UN General Assembly as well as the President of the UN Economic Social Council. And IGF 2020 will be remembered also as a year of focus on youth. I believe the commitment to engaging youth will continue in 2021. I would like to acknowledge the efforts of the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, the MAC, and its chair, Ms. Anrita Easterhausen. The MAC quickly adjusted to the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. They worked tirelessly in the last few months to bring you this virtual IGF. Because in the beginning of the year, when I met with Anrita over the phone, we're still talking about how we're going to prepare the Katowice session. But after a few months, immediately we shifted to preparation of this virtual session. I thank you to all MAC members and to many others who contributed to this year's rich program of the IGF. I also thank our future hosts, Poland in 2021, Ethiopia in 2022, Japan in 2023, and the Russian Federation in 2025. And I invite other member states to consider hosting the 2024 IGF. Dear colleagues, with the deep commitment of these future host countries, we expect increased participation of developing countries. UNDESA, under the direct guidance of the Secretary General and his executive office, stand ready to support stakeholders to carry forward the IGF's mandate. Colleagues and friends, we are at a critical moment as the world faces challenges of historic nature. I'm deeply encouraged by the success of this virtual IGF. Yet it is our physical world that helps to define our humanity. I look forward to our physical gathering in Katowice in December 2021. I thank all of you for the support of this year's IGF. May I conclude my remarks by thanking Jonathan for your moderating many of the sessions over the past week. I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Under Secretary General. It's very kind of you, and it's always a pleasure. I've always enjoyed my engagement with the IGF, so I'm very glad to see you all, and thank you again for coming to speak to us on this closing session. And that is it. We have been here in our homes in lockdown, or some of us in offices, but all virtually. And it is the end of this quite remarkable IGF, as the Under Secretary General was saying. It is now closed, but I would be remiss if I didn't leave you, first of all, without thanking you. But secondly, I will leave you with a video so we can all look ahead to Poland in 2021. Goodbye.
We all live in a digital world. We all need it to be open and safe. We all want to trust.
And to be trusted.
despise control.
And desire freedom.
We are all united.
You're muted, Jonathan.
We can't hear you.
As usual, sorry. Thank you very much, everybody. I think that's a wrap. We are going to have a open mic and feedback session on the 25th of November, 1400 UTC. So I would invite you all to please come there, and because your feedback is very important so that we can improve our things for next year. And with that, thank you to all the scribes, interpreters, and also the the volunteers for the rooms. Thank you very much. You all did a great job, and have a good evening or a good day. Thank you.
And just, Shangatai, I really want to thank the Secretariat again, and to tell everyone that the Secretariat already has IGF outputs up on the website. If you go to the IGF homepage, you'll find a link and you'll find initial messages and recommendations and outcomes. So really congratulations to the Secretariat. Te canta como una loca y después queda muy quieta esperando una